Okay, so I'm here with Richard. We're doing a sort of NoRedInk pairing thing, and we're going to be focusing on APIs for things like focus and what other kind of things. I guess we'll find out as we do more.
Yeah, we need to pull it up. I made a gist where we talked through a bunch of stuff with various community members and talked about use cases and things, but
So
focus
yeah,
is probably the most visible one.
so as with the Elm autocomplete, we're just hoping that by sort of showing these design processes, that'll be helpful for people. Okay, so focus. Is this it? No.
No, I think it's the second one.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so we kind of discussed, should it live in Elm HTML or Elm DOM? And it seems like DOM makes a lot of sense. Is it all in the gist?
Yeah, I think so. I kept editing it to
Be up to date with
yeah,
whatever's going
based on
on.
what people were saying. Oh, right. Yeah, so focus and blur are two obvious ones. Also, measure text comes up as wanting to express it as a function that does not have side effects because even though it's actually making DOM nodes, it's not side effectful because it just like makes it, measures it, and then throws it away.
Yeah.
Um,
And this one doesn't give you any position information, only size information?
Right. So this is so the way we use this at work is that we have.
I've used it before.
Okay, cool.
It was
Yeah.
needed for Element, the old school
Sure.
graphics.
Yeah. So we're doing some crazy layout stuff in some places.
Yeah. And do you think it should be a pure function?
I think so. Yeah.
Just a real slow function. Real slow
Yeah.
pure.
Exactly right. But like places where you want to use that are often like it's pretty inconvenient to try and do it up front, and it's like nothing bad
I
other
had
than
to do it. I
slowness.
had to do it for graphics. I know.
Yeah. Cool. And then so bounds was the positional one. That is like task based.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this one is like actually pure though.
Right.
The definition is
Yes.
followed properly.
Right.
Unless there's global CSS that would mean that it renders different on different times.
Oh, that's a good point. Yup. Wait, no. I don't know if that's. Oh, no. So if you just make, yeah, no, you're right. Okay.
I don't know, maybe we have to test, because like if it's in a document that has styles, but it's not attached to the document.
Right, like what if you make a document fragment? The problem is that you need to be able to style it. Because that's the whole point. Like you need to see what it looks like. Yeah, we could try it with document fragment.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can measure stuff on a document. I've never actually used that.
Or
really.
yeah, or do you have to attach it to the document to get the measurements, or it just doesn't work at all?
Right. Because the thing is, you want to be able to specify some style information and say like measure in that context. Okay, so we'll come back to that one.
Yeah, we can leave that one or do some testing.
Yeah. Incidentally, okay, so maybe we might just want to leave that off of version 1, just like punt it, because if you have bounds, you can implement side effectful measure text yourself, right? Like bounds is just like make a thing, measure its text, be done with it. So presumably that would be a good starting point, and we know you need bounds anyway because you need to be able to get positional info.
Wait, bounds is width and height?
And left and top.
Relative to the window position? Like
it's get client bounding rect or get bounding client rect.
That one actually does give you positional information.
Yes, that's what I mean.
And that one has to be a task.
Right. But my point is that if we don't include measure text in this pass, people can make a less nice one using bounds anyway.
Sure. Okay, I thought you meant that I misunderstood slightly. But okay, I got you now.
And we certainly need bounds for various things.
Yeah. Okay, so these I used recently for the debugging work. But
bounds or the scrolling ones?
Yeah. And again, this is similar information though, or no?
To scroll?
Yeah.
No, scroll's a lot simpler. It's just like you just give it an element, and it's like, okay, here, like it gives you back an integer, and that's it.
And is the integer from the 0 or does it not even matter and it's just that these two are on the same units?
Right. Yeah.
Like whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And pretty much you always use them that way, where you're like, I want to record where that person was. It's like either that or you say 0 because you want it to scroll all the way to the top.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. But so on some level, like get scroll top is like asking the people can't see it, but asking like the top of the box relative to 0 of the whole page, right?
Yeah. Although you can do it per element, right? So it's not just the whole page, it's like the container, I think.
Okay. So scroll top is like scoped to like whatever the
It's like to the scroll bar, right? It's like where is the puck? I forget what the term is for that.
Yeah.
Inside the scroll bar, yeah.
Wrong. I'm gonna go with scroll bar.
No, within the scroll bar, the thing that you grab and move around inside, like
Isn't
the
that
scrubber.
The scroll bar? It's like a bar within a bar. They're both scroll bars. Anyway, okay, I get
scroll it. Scroll barception.
And selecting. Okay, so I saw some discussion of like.
I don't think we need that anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear. So I initially just was like get things by ID because that's how my life works. And you were like, it's got to be selectors, and I never understood what you were talking about. And now it's different, and so I just want to understand that whole.
Yeah, sure. Story. So basically, my thought with selectors is like, oh, all the time you want to write like, I want to do something to like, I don't know, button colon first, or like first of type.
Right.
So you're like, and that's something I've done. And then so what changed my mind about this was thinking about under what circumstances do I want to use that as opposed to just doing it by ID or something like that, something that I'm in control of. And my thought was, I want to do that to mess with other people's third-party things. Like they did a bad job implementing their thing, and I want to like hackily fix it. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, is that something that I want?
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. So somebody else makes I don't know, like a date picker, let's say, and they, like when you bring up the date picker, like I want to have something start selected, like initially selected when it right when it appears.
Right.
But they don't expose an API for that. They just like didn't implement that.
Right.
And so what I could do, and they also didn't put IDs on any of their things. So what I do is like after the user clicks, I tell the date picker, hey, open up, and like maybe I do a set timeout that's like, okay, after it's going to have popped up, then go find by like query selector the appropriate row and column of the date, and then like fire a click event on that or something like that.
Right.
So that's all well and good. But then like I asked myself the question, like that like clearly is a dirty unsupported hack. Like I could upgrade the version of that date picker and that could just totally break. Also, it could just totally break in lots of ways.
Right.
And so I'm like, if I'm doing a dirty hack to somebody else's library, is it good for Elm to have like that be a first class thing that you should reach for? Or should you be forced to use a port for something like that? Because it's like now we're into the danger zone. And I actually think that I like the latter better because I appreciate, like when I'm hunting down bugs, I like that if I'm like something weird and crazy is happening here, I look at like the port stuff first. I'm like, that is the land of danger and like potential problems. If it's in my Elm code, it's like reliable.
Right.
And so this is like, okay, that's an unreliable thing. Let's keep that as a port thing.
Okay. Well, another thing to consider here is that by having it be sort of an external kind of hack, that means there'll be more pressure on the author of a bad package to like fix their thing.
So, absolutely, yeah.
So for people who saw either Elm sortable tables or the Elm autocomplete, both of those are drastically different than air quotes components in React in that the way they interact with your code is very, very configurable. So in both cases, basically every element that gets shown on screen has a way to be configured where you can add your own class or ID or like just basically whatever you want. And so you wouldn't run into these situations of like, oh, I need to talk about that particular element, but there's no way for me to get it because it has no ID because it's like encapsulated. It's great OO programming, like, but you now can't do that kind of customization. And like, if people build libraries, like I think we're starting to, that problem just shouldn't arise in the first place within Elm.
Yeah, and actually another thing that I like about that is just that if someone's writing a library and you from Elm don't have a way to do that, then if library authors are like, okay, this is not safe for you to mess with, they can just not put an ID on it and be like, hey, like don't touch this. And if someone then makes an issue and says like, hey, I need you to put an ID on this because I want to do this, the library author can have a conversation with them like, no, I didn't do that for a reason, and here's why you shouldn't do that, because stuff might break in these very rare corner cases that maybe you didn't think about because you're not the library author. And so giving them sort of the power to, not having that be part of the API gives library authors the power to make things more reliable, I think. So those are two things that came to mind. Then the third thing was actually just what happens if you want to have, like if I want to publish something reusable like autocomplete that wants to say set focus. And I want people to be able to put multiple ones of those on the screen. What does that look like? Like how do I specify I want to set the focus of just this one thing? And I think that in like React, for example, they solve this problem using refs. So you have like actual references to real DOM nodes. But I don't think that makes sense for us for a variety of reasons. But if you're not going to do that, then supposing you have a query selector, I think it would be pretty easy to write something that, if you're a library author, that works for you locally when you have an example page that with just one on it, because you're writing a selector. It's like, oh, just grab the first thing of this class that I put. But then as soon as other people want to put multiple ones on the page, only the top one on the page works. So what you actually need is you need to have an ID, and I think having an ID so that other people who are using the library can like when they're calling your function to make your autocomplete or whatever else, they have to think about, oh, how do I uniquely identify which one on the page I'm talking about? And like you need to expose that as part of your API. Making it sort of like you can't not do that makes it easier for you to, again, make things more reliable and more useful. And again, it's a case where if that weren't the only option, I think that it would very quickly become a cultural thing to say only do it that way. And so it makes more sense to me to say, well, let's just make that the only way to do it. And then the final consideration was when you asked the question about which is faster, query selector or document.getElementById. by ID. Like I looked around and it seemed like the consensus was that document.getElementById by ID is faster, but I was unable to tell by how much because JSPerf is down. And lots of people just link to actual benchmarks rather than like showing screenshots, unfortunately. But it, like, nobody said query selector was faster or as fast, so it seems like safe to assume that that one's good. I was thinking about
how okay, so I had two thoughts based on that. One was, I think it'll end up being that you never want to hard code a class or ID in any sort of reusable view code. I can imagine that you want to allow people to give you a prefix and then set IDs based on that, just as maybe as a convenience, where you don't necessarily want them touching your IDs, but you do want things to be addressable in various ways. That seems...
I think it's actually the other way around, where you would say, give me a unique ID for this element, and I might use it as a prefix if I have multiple things within myself that I want to focus on. But like at the end of the day, you need to know, like, this refers to this thing. Like, give me an ID and I'm going to do stuff with it. But like in the same way, basically the analogy that came to mind was HTML.keyed. So it's like you need to tell me a way to uniquely identify myself.
Right, but are you saying that for a user, they'll know about the outermost one, but won't necessarily know about particular internal?
Yeah.
Okay. Because then it's like, well, what if they want to focus on a thing? Right, so I'm imagining like, one way to expose that is to make it all user configurable. So if they do want to address it, they can add their own ID to each particular. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
And like what level of that seems just nicer.
Yeah, that's the thing.
If you want it to be addressable, make it
I'll expose an API that tells you how to specifically do the thing you want.
Right.
Yeah.
And if it's maybe, yeah, it'd just be a maybe ID, and if it's nothing, then it's not addressable.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, don't generate IDs. That's a good rule.
Right. Right.
And then everyone can use their own crazy scheme for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another thing that I put.
The other thing was okay. After that was, what was the last thing?
Performance.
Yeah. Okay, I was thinking about if I had to optimize getting of IDs. Essentially, because we do this diffing, we see every ID that's placed in, and we know when they're taken out.
Oh yeah.
So you can really easily make like a hash table of like IDs to.
Oh, it's like automatic refs, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I suspect that why would they not do that behind the scenes? It'd be crazy to me if they didn't do that.
I suspect in React they do because they have the first class.
No, I just mean in the browsers, right? Like get element.
Oh yes.
They have the same information as well. They know what the DOM is.
Yeah.
And for them to not be doing that, maybe there's some reason.
I'm 99% sure I've heard of them explicitly doing that.
Okay.
So yeah.
And if that's the case, then get element IDs, their implementation is going to be faster than anything we can do in JavaScript.
Oh, true.
Because they get to write in C++.
Right. Yeah, fair.
And I think the strings, if the strings get interned, they can probably look things up even quicker because it's actually a number. And I don't know.
Jit, yo. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, so if you go back to that Elm Discuss thread.
Sorry to viewers, we've just been looking at exactly the same thing for
Well, that's what we're talking about, though.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah.
If you want to go back to that real quick. So I listed some design goals. Basically, these should replace workarounds. You should. Basically, I wanted to try and, at least for this pass, just focus on current pain points because I know that the scope of this is potentially very large in the long run because it's the whole DOM.
Right.
So I wanted to be let's focus on things where people are currently I need this so much that I have to work around it's not being there.
Yeah.
And then the second one was don't mess with virtual DOM. This should just be separate and only dealing with DOM stuff. And then So and the third was
non-invasive stuff.
Yeah, don't break virtual DOM interactions, and also don't depend on virtual DOM. Let's keep this separate. I don't know if that's feasible indefinitely, but it seems again for this pass, there's low-hanging fruit focus and bounds and stuff like that, where it's
those are ones that sort of virtual DOM doesn't really have anything to say about those.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, that was kind of my sense. So
and the okay, we do have them. And so in the revised version,
there's no selector error.
It is a ID error, or a not found.
Right, yeah.
But there's still an error like this, and this is an ID.
Yes, right.
Okay.
And we can maybe make a type alias for that just to make it clear, this is an ID. I don't know. That's useful, dom.id.
I have mixed feelings about type aliases to primitive types. Just on the one hand, that's useful.
Yeah. On the other hand, it feels weird when you use it.
Well, no, whenever I see docs that are oh, I have to give it an ID, and then I go look it up, and it's just a string. It's just okay.
Yeah, fair point.
It's just a string. I don't know. I personally find that, but
on the one hand, that's weird. But once you learn it, seeing that in lots of type annotations can be kind of nice because then you don't have to go on each case look up what is this string? What kind of string am I supposed to get? Fair. But I agree. There's definitely a tension there.
Because it's not actually type safety. It's not actually an ID.
Yeah,
And I feel weird naming things something different if it's not giving you any guarantees at all. You know what I'm saying?
That's a fair point. Yeah.
And in this case, we don't have many different kinds of strings. I don't know.
It's pretty easy to just do it as string and then maybe change our minds later because it wouldn't be a breaking change.
Yeah.
Actually, does the compiler do that? If I replace this with a type alias for the same thing, would Elm package pick that up as a major change?
I'm not sure. I
was surprised by?
Thing might be confused by that.
I tried changing a type variable name and it didn't get tricked by that.
Yeah.
It was this is a This is not a change.
Yeah, we had an intern work on this a while ago, and that was one of the things he was like, okay, they rename all the type variables, but they're used in all the same places.
Yeah.
And so not only does it detect renaming, but if you make something more generic, it's also fine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So like if you go from int to a, we're okay with that.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Nice.
Um,
Okay, so.
and is this the bounds?
I called it bounds because I can never remember in what 3 order those words go. Like when I'm using it in JavaScript, I'm like, I remember it's get, and then there's like a rect and a bounding and a client somewhere in some order.
Are you ever getting the non-client rectangle?
I don't know.
What would that mean?
I don't know what that, yeah. I don't know what the, I guess there's like get client rects it mentions, but I don't know what that does. Actually, I've never used it.
For each box in a client. Okay, a client is a real concept.
Cool.
Browser support. What's the browser support? Unlisted. Of client rect objects. Okay, so client recs are an object. I mean, I wonder. Get. Okay. No.
Wow. Two other things I just remembered to talk about with regards to this. So there were discussions about like potential race conditions in the same way as like value and default value.
Yeah.
And Irakli had some. If you're watching and I mispronounced your name, I apologize. But there were basically talk about like, is there some way that we can do this through virtual DOM and have something more reliable than the ID system? I personally think that it's a noble goal, but I don't see it working out in practice.
Well, so I guess it's good to talk about that because I don't think I was very clear in that discussion.
Okay.
But just like, essentially, the trick that we've done with virtual DOM is we've taken a thing that's not pure and like been able to create a pure function that like does stuff. Mm-hmm. But the sort of essence of that is it's just a transformation, right? So if my model is the same, my view should look the same no matter what. Now the problem with this is like someone clicks and you want focus, like essentially if the DOM actually was pure, then it would go in virtual DOM, right? Like, and you'd say focus, and if there are multiple ones, we choose the first one or something like this. But like, because the DOM owns state, basically the fact that the DOM owns state ruins a lot of stuff and forces us to be in a client-server relationship with the DOM in certain scenarios. Yeah. Right. So when the state's held there, like in a text box, there's no getting it out. You like, and it's so bad that you can't even capture all the events and hold the state yourself. Like you just can't construct that version of reality. Right. So like you're forced into this, like by virtue of them holding state. You know, I did the like accidentally concurrent talk. Like the fact that they hold state separate from you puts you in a client-server relationship, whether you believe that or not. It's just like a fact about what's going on. So when you're in that situation, you need to be talking about it. Like talking about it in a pure way doesn't really.
And so we can represent a very large subset of those interactions in a pure way, namely going from virtual DOM to actual DOM, but not 100%, and it can never be 100%.
Because of the design of the DOM. If they gave us elements that let us own the state, we could.
Yeah.
But they don't.
That would be an interesting world, but we don't live in it.
But yeah, and just like thinking of the sort of practical aspects of like, if you were to do it as a property that you added to different things, that implies that you're tracking focus yourself, which is like, I'd argue, what you would do in a world
Yeah.
where you own all your state, right? Like you would control where.
Well, I seem to recall,
was hosted.
I think Soren, but again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm American and ignorant, and it's a problem. But basically proposed that you could do it as an attribute instead of having a like task-based set. So you could just say this thing has focus. And of course, the question becomes, what happens if you say that multiple things have focus? Also, there are questions of
But
like.
it's also like someone presses tab.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now what happens? Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
I mean, there it does raise a lot of questions.
And the root problem is like because there is this stateful control logic through tab and through like
right.
this sort of keyboard stuff, it just isn't going to work, right?
Yeah.
Like it all needs to be owned by the same thing, and because it's not, we have to sort of acknowledge their ownership, and like it's not our fault.
Yeah. Okay.
Messed it up in the 90s.
Fair enough.
So yeah, so that's kind of my view on this. Maybe it'll turn out to be wrong long term, but it's not the end of the world if we have these operations. So I noticed there's more stuff here than what you say. So you said this is what bounds is, but the client rect gives us width and height and x and y relative to the viewport origin, which I don't know if that means.
I think that x and y are synonyms for left and top. I'm just reading it. Like I'm trying to diff across multiple rows, but in my head, but I think those are the exact same words.
Yeah, but are they the same?
I mean,
yeah.
fair question.
And then like width and height, those can be derived. Yeah, okay. They're just saying, hey, you can. So did you leave it out knowing that it could be derived, or maybe this isn't like super well supported or something?
I think I just did what jQuery did. I didn't have super strong feelings other than that you get the info you need. Like there are 4 pieces of information. There are others that can be derived from those 4. I suspect that probably X, Y width height, or maybe like top left width height are sort of the most commonly wanted ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't actually remember what I put. It's right over there in the other tab, but
only the corner.
I see. Yeah. So arguably width and height would make more sense. But then again, are width and height necessarily on there in older browsers? Or
yeah, that's the question. I don't know.
So I think probably it makes the most sense to optimize for what can we get most quickly. Like our doing additional calculations on top of what the browser's already doing seems like the wrong idea for this API. It'd be better for somebody else to write a convenience wrapper around it, something like that. So that if you need the performance, you can get it. Like basically optimizing for performance and just do as few calculations as possible and just be like, here's the raw info that you need to.
So are you saying like have it all?
No, I'm saying, well, without the synonyms. I guess my question is, width and height are good if they reliably show up in all browsers, including older ones. But I think it might be the case that older browsers only have some subset of the ones that MDN just listed there. One good way to do this.
I've come back to the beginning.
One reliable way to do this is to look at the jQuery source code, because they've had to actually do this and be like, we have
hey, look.
Basic support, Internet Explorer 4,
so
width and height introduced in IE 9. Okay.
That's why it's not there probably. And then XY.
Well, I can't take credit for. I didn't actually look this up, so I don't think. Oh, maybe I did. This was a while ago, but I don't remember doing it, so I'm not gonna.
Okay, and then this as well. So that's why.
So width and height and XY are non-standard. Okay.
Well,
but the exact API that I proposed has been around since the dawn of time and is reliably there and fast. Yeah.
Chrome is the start of time.
Well, IE4 is pretty.
CE is Chrome era.
Chrome era. Do you remember when Chrome came out and there was that Scott McCloud cartoon explaining it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they were like,
Like having to
look,
do that.
every tab is its own process. Like they explained why that was
That was
cool.
really cool.
Yeah, I remember that. It was neat. And I downloaded it.
Okay, so the API has been justified. Good work. Good work.
Cool.
Okay, so hopefully again that was some helpful context on what's going on with the DOM stuff. We'll code it up in the next hour and maybe we'll like release it. So maybe it'll be on package before this video goes on the internet.
That would be awesome.
These videos take so long to upload. There's a high chance. Anyway.
Cool. Thanks for hanging out.
All right.
Peace.